to welcome you all to this very important press conference aimed at addressing vital issues across the various sectors of the country as it affects government policies, the rule of law, as well as the economic stability of the nation Nigeria. To start with, we want to commend President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for his purposeful leadership drive, restructuring of governmental policies and operational systems since assuming office, the effect of which has begun to rekindle the hope of average Nigerians that government can actually serve the common good of the common people. We therefore encourage Mr. President to continue in this direction with equity and justice as he work for a new value system in Nigeria. We equally want to commend the Acting Inspector General of Police, Olukayode Egbetokun, for an unusual reforms in the Nigerian police force and his commitment to holding errant officers accountable for abuse of official duties and violation of human rights. He is bringing a new value system to the Nigerian police system, and this drive must be sustained. We also must commend INEC for filing charges against its suspended resident electoral commissioner, Odu Yunusa Ari, in Adamawa State. This is a good step in good direction, and it is very, very commendable. This morning, we are compelled to call on the attention of the federal government of Nigeria and the entire people of the country to certain critical issues in the country which has become a sordid tale of the people. And number one, we'll be starting with Servicom. The service compact with all Nigerians has failed its purpose. In 2004, Nigerians heaved a sigh of relief with emergence of the service compact with all Nigerians, popularly known as Servicom, which was established to promote effective and quality service to the people of Nigeria, as well as empower public officers to be at alert to their responsibilities in providing improved, efficient, timely, and transparent service across governmental ministries, departments, agencies, and parastatals. The body was supposed to be a mechanism through which the Nigerians can lodge complaints against tyrannical and errant public officers whose conduct falls below the standard required of public and civil servants. Servicom customarily have offices in all federal government agencies, take complaints, and ensure that justice and fairness is done. Unfortunately, this body has now failed to uphold the purpose of its establishment. The agency no longer addresses complaints and has now become very ineffective. The organization leadership and modus operandi has accordingly encouraged abuse of official duties on one hand, as well as precluding victims of these errant officers from accessing appropriate remedy within the administrative system. This is our concern about Servicom. When Servicom was established, and as a matter of fact, 3 years ago, Servicom usually is an organization where Nigerians run to get succor when government agencies are not performing their action to expectation. But sadly today, this very good organization has become very, very ineffective. The organization has failed its purpose. As a legal practitioner, from my experience, I've had a series of engagement with government agencies wherein we approach Servicom, and Servicom will put the respective government agencies on their toes, and the right thing and the appropriate thing will be done. But today, that is not the issue. We have numerous examples. For example, in NIPOST, in the past, they have effective Servicom system where you have complaint, you take it to them, and they address the issue. In EFCC, they have an effective Servicom system. I had an issue some years back with EFCC, very serious one, and I took the complaint to Servicom in EFCC. Officers involved were summoned, and the matter was addressed. And today, just recently, some students were stopped from entering University of Abuja because they are claimed or alleged to be dressed inappropriately because they are wearing trousers. And these people complained to us as people who are interested in the welfare and dignity of Nigerians. And we advise them to approach the Servicom desks in their institution. But sadly, there's nobody there. The office is now moribund. The office is now ineffective. We are calling on the federal government of Nigeria to understand that there's a need for Nigerians to be able to access quality service. There's a need for Nigerians to have a platform where at any point in time service is not duly given to them. They can hear their complaint. sadly today, we have a crisis in country. You have a government agencies across the country. You go to Ministry of Justice, you go to our High Court, you have issues with officers of court, you have issues with people, and you cannot complain to Servicom. Because what Servicom is doing right now is that Servicom is using taxpayers' money to pay their staffs, and they are doing nothing to the Nigerian government. And they are doing nothing to the Nigerian people. So our concern is that there's a need for Servicom to be revitalized. There's a need for Servicom to be revived, or the organization should be cancelled, so that Nigeria can get a viable alternative, a viable platform to raise complaint at when due. The second issue here that we'll be addressing is issue of law enforcement agencies, not debt collector. Sadly today, it is a new experience across the country, particularly with security agencies, the Nigerian police and EFCC. EFCC and Nigerian police are established for the purpose of fighting corruption and addressing criminality in the country. But the most painful experience today, particularly EFCC, the painful experience today, that EFCC is gradually snowballing into an organization to be recovering debt on behalf of Nigerians. And this is a very sad narrative that must be addressed. EFCC's business is to ensure, yes, we agree that there's a thin line between criminality and civil dispute. But the truth is, as an organization that is being funded by taxpayers' money, such an organization should not meddle into civil issues, should not meddle into civil transactions. We are calling on the leadership of EFCC to understand that the sole purpose and the objective of setting up the organization must be protected at all times. So we have two other issues. Maybe one of my colleagues will take it up.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, very well.
Second issue that we'll be addressing today is the issue of double taxation. The new government seemed to be very keen on generating revenue for the government, and if you go by the inaugural speech of the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu on 29th of May 2023, you notice that he mentioned that he's going to curb the issue of double taxation and multiple taxation to the benefit of local and foreign investors. But this issue calls for attention, the recent development in relation to tax. We commend the fact that the federal government has decided to suspend some tax until September, arising from the Finance Act. Nonetheless, we know that there are some pending issues relating to taxations that has been underlying and preventing small and medium-scale enterprises. For instance, the recent development relating to the tax relating to proof of ownership in Lagos State is very vital, and that's one of the reasons why we decided to address the issue of double and multiple taxation at this press conference. First and foremost, one of the core characteristics of taxation is that it must be fair, it must be transparent. It's an hallowed principle. You cannot go any way around it. Now, if you have proof of ownership tax levy, when you buy an item in 1 year and you have to prove that you own it the next year and the following year and every other year, is as good as saying if I buy my phone and I've paid value-added tax on that phone, and the next year I have to pay proof of ownership to show that I own that phone, after I've paid value-added tax for the first time I purchased it, it means I'm being multiply taxed and doubly taxed around that. And then you look at another issue that affects small and medium-scale businesses in Nigeria. You see, under the legal terrain, I don't think it's news to any lawyer or any law student in any university that business names are not legal entity. Business names arise from businesses that are set up by sole proprietors or partners. Those partners, as individual proprietors, have paid the price at the point of registration to own their tax identification numbers, and as they carry on business, they pay personal income tax. You see, the proceeds they make from that business comes to them as personal income, and they pay tax arising from that. The moment business names are required to now again own TIN to acquire tax identification numbers, and they remit tax to government, it's like you're taxing the chicken and you're taxing the egg that it lays. it becomes a case of double taxation, and that needs to be resolved. We don't dispute the fact that taxation is one of the core means by which governments will generate revenues, but it must not be at the point of choking the citizens. It's the new term that you should let the poor breathe. We cannot shy away from the fact that government needs to take its time to deliberate on issues of taxation because it affects the economical strength of the nation and the viability of small and medium-scale businesses. And in that regard, we call on the federal government to check on all the tax laws, review them, synchronize all of them, value-added tax, company income tax, personal income tax, taxes chargeable on companies and businesses should be clearly separated, and the CAC needs to be called upon, Federal Inland Revenue Service needs to be called upon to check the viability of taxing business names. I understand that there are limited liability partnerships under the Companies and Income Tax, under the Companies and Other Matters Act now, which allows some partnerships that originally
is with respect to the issue of law reforms and amendments. Firstly, we use this opportunity to congratulate the newly elected leadership of the National Assembly, ably led by distinguished Senator WIKELEAKS and Right Honorable Tajuddin Abbas of the House of Representatives. Very recently, we all were witnesses to the recent judgment of the Federal High Court sitting in Oka, wherein the Federal High Court had declared that the immediate past Inspector General of Police was occupying the office illegally. That judgment, obviously, was in contradiction to an earlier judgment of the Federal High Court as well, sitting in Abuja, which had earlier declared that the President could extend the tenure of the Inspector General of Police pending when a substantive Inspector General of Police is appointed. Now, basically, this draws us to the question as to the provisions of the Police Act. The recent Police Act as enacted, which has now provided for a specific tenure, a 4-year single term for office of the Inspector General of Police. Now, that provision has equally gone forth to make a subsequent provision which now creates the office of the Inspector General of Police to say that while you may occupy this office for 4 years, you should equally not occupy office more than 65 years or 35 years in office or 65 years, which any of them comes first. Now, the provision of the Police Act basically has created a serious contradiction to the provisions of the Constitution and as well with respect to the public service rules. The need for the National Assembly led by Senator WIKELEAKS and Right Honorable Tajuddin Abbas to review the Police Act to reflect the true intentions of these public service rules is of utmost importance, because we cannot run a country where we have our laws having divergent provisions which the courts give different interpretations according to what or facts put forth to them. Now, with respect to that particular issue, I must first of all commend the President for appointing the recent Inspector General of Police currently appointed. Now, that appointment, if we were to go by the provisions of the Police Act, it therefore means that despite the fact that the current acting Inspector General of Police tenure, time in office is to end next year, he will be expected to stay in office for the next 4 years by reason of that particular provision of the Police Act. Because that was towards basically what happened with the immediate past Inspector General of Police, where he stayed in office beyond the time provided for by the public service rules. Now, that particular issue calls for the National Assembly to, with utmost importance, review that provision so as to provide clarity to the nation with respect to how a very important office with respect to the security landscape of the country should be governed and administered. Secondly, and of utmost importance too, this one is of great importance to us all as Nigerians. We all are very much aware that there is a provision with respect to enforcement of judgments. You know, generally when you sue government agencies and you get judgment, there's a law which governs the way in which you go to enforce that said judgment. Now, this law is basically the law that we refer to as the Sheriff and Civil Process Act. Now, this act, for me, is a cake. It's outdated. It has outstayed its welcome. Why do I say so? We are saying so basically because by virtue of the provisions of Section 84 of that said act, the act now provides that for anyone who wants to enforce a judgment against a government agency, the said person should apply for consent from the office of the Attorney General of the Federation or Attorney General of the States. Now, how will an Attorney General of the Federation or Attorney General of the State grant consent for you to go and take money from government purse when the State Attorney General is representing the state government? And the state judgment you intend to enforce is against the government. Hence, the National Assembly is on this note, with respect, called and invited that they should take a noble course to review the Sheriff and Civil Process Act to reflect the spirit and intentions on Nigerians. Because for us, we believe that the moment that act is amended or reviewed, it will checkmate actions of government agencies, particularly with respect to the security agencies, wherein issues of enforcement or breach of fundamental rights of individuals will be curtailed and checkmated. Furthermore, my colleague here had earlier said something here when he mentioned the issue of double taxation. It's of utmost importance that I equally draw the attention of government, particularly with respect to the FCT, because we all here are domiciled and resident here in the FCT. Now, in the FCT, we have a situation now where most of the area councils recall that the National Assembly makes laws for the FCT. Now, we are equally inviting the National Assembly to look into the laws with respect to the area councils in the FCT, wherein we now have instances where area councils now subcontract taxation purposes to individuals to enforce, thereby leading to arbitrary taxations. You see individuals bring arbitrary tax figures to you to pay. This in its own set basically will affect business and economy in the FCT, because we have startup companies being frustrated by such arbitrary taxations, which are not by any way provided for by laws. We could see these private agents going ahead to take taxes which are not meant to be taken by local government or area councils, basically because they are not to be held responsible. They are not to be held accountable. The people who are to be held accountable is basically the government. Furthermore, we equally look at the issue of the Custom and Excise Duty Act. I respectfully want to equally call on the National Assembly to, as a matter of urgency, look and review the Custom and Excise Duty Act with respect to the issue of administration and management of the state customs. We recall just recently, the immediate past Custom Controller General was a non-custom officer. He was appointed, he stayed in office all through the period and left office as a non-custom officer. Why custom officers who had grown in the structure, believing that one day they would assume that office, were meant to retire and leave and go home without achieving that particular dream. So we call on the National Assembly. I recall that the president, the immediate past president, President Muhammad Buhari, actually refused assent on the amendment as proposed by the National Assembly earlier. We respectfully invited the National Assembly to, as a matter of urgency, bring back that said bill that its assent was refused by the immediate past president, review it and forward it immediately to the president, so as to guide us against falling into such a situation where we have non-career officers occupying and heading agencies of governments in this respect. Equally of utmost importance, when we are dealing with this, it takes us equally back to the issue of the police. Because where we are dealing with the police, a police officer who has stayed to the period provided for by law, which is 35 years or 65 years, as the case may be, who now outstays that period, obviously is no longer a police officer. And such a non-police officer cannot head police officers. It kills and destroys the spirit and morals of officers. And we believe that an amendment and review of those laws would be of great benefit to our nation. Finally, I equally want to invite the National Assembly to equally, as a matter of urgency, call to question the Federal Road Safety Agency Corporation, which just recently brought in with respect to the issue of the renewal of car proof of ownership. It is equally an issue which deals with the law, because I think they are trying to invoke the provisions of the National Road Traffic Regulations. To our mind, we believe that the moment a person purchases a vehicle or purchases any item and gets proof of ownership, there is no law which requires or which is appropriate to require him to renew such ownership annually. Hence, such a provision equally should be reviewed by the National Assembly. All in all, we invite the National Assembly to, as a matter of urgency and as a matter of importance, look through most of the laws we have in our country as of today, because most of these laws have outlived and outstayed their welcome and are no longer relevant in the current state of affairs in Nigeria. Hence, we invite them to please review these laws and make them more workable for the Nigerian society and economy. Thank you all.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. In the right perspective, I think in my own wisdom, and this is our collective position, the federal government of Nigeria, under the new leadership of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, it sounds like Muhammad Buhari, needs to actually have a rethink about all the freedom fighters across the country, political detainees, people like Sunday Igboho, people like Nnamdi Kanu. And of course, well, Showore's case is different, but and of course for Showore, because in Showore's case, I mean, Showore is fighting a just cause. Showore is not running away from the country, and Showore cannot be seen as a secessionist as claimed by government. I think all of these political detainees who have at one point or the other consistently supply voice and vision for the genuine aspiration of the Nigerian people, the current administration should have a rethink to give a political solution to this matter. The reason is because the time we are in Nigeria today, there's a need for us to strongly rebuild the spirit of our common consanguinity, the Nigerian spirit, where every single person across the country, regardless of social, political, economic, ethnic divide, can begin to see this country as a nation we all can be proud of. So we're expecting President Buhari, and I think President Bola Tinubu. I think this will give answers to Sunday Igboho's case. For Sunday Igboho is doing very well. Very soon, Sunday Igboho will be in Nigeria in a very big ceremonial arrangement, and you guys will be there, you know. And also, there's something we need you to please amplify, and that is the issue of judgment enforcement as raised by my colleague. I think last year we did a matter on behalf of a journalist, and we secured judgment on behalf of the journalist. We got judgment on behalf of the journalist, but sadly, the journalist is there with his judgment, and nothing can be done because it was judgment against the Nigerian police force, but there's no way to enforce the judgment. And that is why impunity continues, because there's no way to enforce judgment against some government agencies, because there's a requirement for you to get the AG consent, which we think is not appropriate and is obsolete. And also in the case of Omoyele Showore, he has secured a lot of judgment against government agencies, particularly the DSS, you know, that detained him wrongfully. But sadly, he can't get compensation. He can't get compensation because the process of getting judgment enforcement in Nigeria is also another injustice. And this, we think, must be amplified and must be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.